press record. All right then. So so the first question I have is like a general question. So as a female leader, what's been most significant barrier in your career? Or if not, what has been like the most helpful stepping stone? And I'm going to give the first talking stick to CRISTINA.
Thank you. It's a very good question. So I have to say that, so first of all, I am from Italy. You probably guessed that from my accent, but interestingly, computer science. So I have a degree in computer science from Italy, and there, when I was doing my undergrad and master's there, the ratio male-female was 50-50. So at the time, I have to say, you know, as a student at the university, I never quite felt any difficulties or discriminations due to the fact, you know, to gender issues, right? And then for my PhD, I was at the University of Pittsburgh. And again, because mine was a quite interdisciplinary program, it was called the Intelligent Systems Program, but it was a combination of computer science, cognitive science, medical informatics. So again, it was not your typical computer science department, which might, you know, feel a little bit daunting for a female student. And then coming to UBC in a traditional computer science department, right away, there were a lot of initiatives in place for, you know, as I mentioned earlier, trying to increase the number of female in computer science and students. So again, in my department, I have to say I never really experienced barriers that are due to being female. Despite the fact that, of course, the female professors are far fewer than the male professors, but still the culture is very much inclusive. So I just have to say that from that point of view, I've always been very lucky. You know, I think perhaps the barrier sometimes has been me, like sometimes feeling insecure and not comfortable in speaking up, right? Which is something that then I learned to do. But despite the fact that the environment was quite welcoming, sometimes I felt that it was me who was preventing myself from being more proactive and me being more assertive. So I feel that sometimes, and you know, could be just personality. And I don't know if it's gender related, but sometimes I feel that we might need help at that level. And there are environments that are not as welcoming. So that's a totally different issue. But when, even in situations that could be more conducive to, you know, feeling included and respected, sometimes there are barriers there due to perhaps self-perception or, you know, self-esteem that could be in the way.
Sounds like, CRISTINA, it's a very good way of describing like the imposter syndrome and recognizing that it's not only the environment, it's like it's your mindset. So yeah. I see Bethany's unmuted. Would she like the next talking stick?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think that's so on point. I think that for myself, it wasn't necessarily other people so much as realizing, like, just because I'm not the exact same as that other person. So I was in a lab with, I wasn't as fortunate as CRISTINA. You know, I was in a lab with all men, and I had a different perspective. I was a lot more interdisciplinary. And going in and doing machine learning and saying, well, what about the real world? What about putting this in action? And people are like, what are you talking about? We're doing simulators, we're doing math, you know, and my perspective was always different. And I always felt like maybe that wasn't enough, or maybe I was wrong. And it was only after, you know, succeeding, honestly, and then being like, oh, actually my perspective is unique. And actually I bring something else to this table. But it was definitely, and it still happens, where it's just like, I'm surrounded by other people that think something else, and, you know, maybe I'm wrong. And I think that that's something that I try to instill in the students that each unique perspective is actually valuable. Just because you're not thinking the same as somebody else doesn't mean that it's less.
Thank you, Bethany. Yeah, just recognizing the group think, like when it's helpful and like when you have to like learn to put on a different thinking hat. Yeah, pass the talking stick to Marjorie.
Sure. I did my master's in environmental data management, so very technical. And after hitting the glass ceiling multiple times, it was quite easy to leave my cushy corporate job, start my own AI startup. But the biggest barrier I found is just there's a natural bias against women raising money. So I think I probably had to do twice as many pitches as others. I always had a good cadre of experienced men around me, but it was always me doing most of the pitches. And it was just so overt in some pitches where, you know, in one case, there was about 20 people pitching and about 80% of the women were asked to come back up and be asked harder questions. And it was just so overt. I was just like looking around and we're like, wow, everybody else see this? Okay. So that has been a struggle, but we did it, we made it, and we exited. So it all worked out, but I just, you know, you can do it. You can lead your own company. You just got to work extra hard.
Thank you, Marjorie. I'll hand the talking stick to Holly.
Yes, well, I have a very, let's see, love-hate relationship with this question, because you know, fostering more inclusive, safe spaces was actually the impetus for starting Women Who Code. I felt quite bluntly that there weren't really spaces in the meetup community, the technical meetup community for women, or I was like, where are they? And actually, I still remember to this day going to a prominent tech meetup after I had graduated from a kind of a engineering boot camp. I was bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and I went, and it was like 99% men, and I was like, okay, this is a little strange. All right, wasn't expecting this. And there I encountered some of the hallmarks of what can be categorized as the toxic, bro-y culture, which I just felt was, maybe okay in that context, but really not welcoming to a diverse, roster of people. And I think, we really need to broaden the label of diversity to not just mean gender diversity, but, gender identity and socioeconomic background and ethnicity and everything. And it's becoming, more and more people are realizing it's a huge asset actually in product development, because having a diverse collection of ideas and people actually allows the resurfacing and acknowledgement of what's it called? Not bias, but oh my God, I'm blanking. Blind spots.
Spot?
Yes. Blind spots, the other B word. Sorry, it's been a long day. I had many engineering stand-ups today, so apologies. But yeah, I mean, I think I do agree with what's been said. There is this imposter syndrome. And every single woman engineer, at least from a non-traditional background like myself, has felt it in big corporate culture. It is us, but also I've seen, unconscious bias in fundraising. I've seen it in promotions. I've seen it in the way people interpret assertive behavior from women, and then, map that back to, oh, she's just, a bitch, or she's just like, totally ridiculous or emotional. I mean, even the way we describe behavior, cross-gender is different. So I've seen that, but, one of my goals as a AI engineering director is, you're only as good as your team, and you have to pull people up, that's your role once you get to a certain point. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I have a lot of opinions on this, so I'll stop
It's
now.
very informative. Thank you. That helps lead into my next question. And so the question is, and this might be a bit of a, what's the word, salad jam. From your experiences, like obviously Women Who Code is like very inclusively promote, empower women, but how does a female leader like work with or collaborate with like the upper VPs or CEOs to promote an equal employment organization in historically male-dominant industries? Does anyone want to go first? Marjorie? Okay.
Well, that's a good question. I'm trying to think of what I did over the years, and I'm pretty outspoken and loud spoken, and I think I've always been able to put my ideas forward, and I have a consensus approach to projects, trying to make sure everybody's voices are heard and everybody comes along, and always listen to the quietest voice because they're often the most intelligent. I'm very loud, so slam myself there. But in a male-dominated industry, for sure, it helps to be kind of a little, forthright and put yourself forward with confidence, and always to bring new ideas to the table. That usually gets a lot of traction, and I think that's kind of been a bit of my secret sauce. And just knowing the industry and always going the extra mile and being on committees and working on being, on different boards and doing volunteer work, just continuing to focus on the path, no matter what, but trying to do it with my tribe, if you will. But it's always difficult. The glass ceilings that I hit, usually I would, get multiple promotions, and then it would get to like the director or VP level, and there'd be, a whole bunch of guys, and I would lose out and I'd leave the company. The third time I started my own company, and with an eye to make it as diverse as possible. We're probably about 40% diverse. It fluctuates. It is hard to find talent. We're in Vancouver, so we're very lucky. So, we have large data labeling and large ML team, and, just growing a sales and marketing force right now. We're only about 25 people, but I really try to keep my eye on that. And programs like this, I think, are critical for more women to come forward and feel comfortable in this industry. Should I pass the talking stick to Bethany?
Sure. So yeah, I mean, where I am right now, I luckily have a fantastic team, but previously I was not so lucky. And the approach that I had was twofold. One was I was with a bunch of I'll just say it, older engineers, so they were just of a particular mindset, and they completely underestimated me, as I say that so well. And it was just, okay, fine, you don't think I'm going to do anything, that's fine. And then I was able to find, like you were saying, find the people that agreed with what you were trying to do, make some momentum till I got to the point where it was clear that something was going to happen. I also, for the people that weren't stuck and but they didn't necessarily notice what was happening, because you have some people like, I don't see a problem here, and it's just so, and then you have these talks and then just like, well, she was wearing something she shouldn't have been wearing, or, those ridiculous conversations. And so, you kind of don't even, I didn't even bother with them, but I took the other people that didn't necessarily see the harm that was happening, but weren't complicit in it, and say, maybe we should look at our hiring practices. What sort of things are we doing? How are our retention was really low. And just recognizing that, and then saying, okay, how can we change our practices because our students would benefit from it, and our, and our outreach would be better. And so then, then showing the results to the leadership team was really quite helpful. And then I became their boss. And then it was, then I had another stick that I had, and it was just like, now all of a sudden I was able to say, no, here's the practices that we're going to put in place, and here's how we are going to move forward. And yeah, they'll get mad, and yeah, they'll call you names and say you're too assertive, but then you can stand up for the people that don't, that are maybe more quiet. Because I'm fortunate that I am a loud and aggressive woman, so that really helps. But then recognizing, like, because I have this ability, I have this confidence, and I've had this experience, that I can help others that maybe don't come from the same culture that allows that. And so it allows you to bring more people with you.
Thank you, Bethany. Hand the talking stick to CRISTINA. You're still on mute. Sorry. Typical Zoom.
Thanks for letting me know. So obviously the dynamics in a big university are different than in a company. So you don't necessarily have this direct interactions with, well, you have your department head, for instance, but the power relationship is quite different. So, and again, policies tend to be, the broader policies tend to be decided more at the university level. But if, of course, it's important to make your voice heard at that level as well. And one example that I want to bring up is, again, UBC on paper always had, very good intentions in terms of supporting women and students and female faculty members in having careers that would be comparable to the male colleagues. But for instance, for the longest time, there was this issue of daycare, for instance. Daycare in Vancouver, again, I don't want to brag about Italy, but in Italy, you need daycare, you get it, okay? Here, I found that it was amazing that even if you paid a lot of money, which is what you have to do if you want to put your children at UBC daycare, you still had to wait for many months without even knowing for how long you had to wait, because that's the way it is. It's a long story, but it was becoming a real issue. And also the daycare hours were 8:30 to 5, and you had to pick up your child at 5. And, as faculty member, don't work 8 to 5 and you don't rest on weekends, right? There are always things going on. And, it was a very serious issue that for the longest time, people were trying to bring up in different settings in the university, but it was hard to make any concrete initiative just because it's, again, it's such a big university, and unless there is a specific intention at the higher level to go in that direction, it's difficult to change things. But eventually, as as the years progressed, I think there has been at least there have been initiatives to build more daycares. The problem is not solved. It's still a big problem. And I think it's more of a problem, I guess, at the province level, where in general, there's early childhood care. It's, I don't know, it's just not necessarily well organized for supporting women, at different levels that really want to have, a full-time career. But it's something that it's a problem, and it has been for a long time. And again, it's getting a little bit better because in the end, there were initiatives, and women were female faculty members were trying to voice their concerns. And but it can be a struggle, especially in that kind of large public organization where reaching the top, it's hard in terms of making your voice heard. All the way up, it can be hard. Yeah.
Thank you, Christina. Hand the talking stick over to Holly. Does she have any other opinions to add?
Yeah, I think I'll answer this as a hiring manager and then also as, an employee at a tech company. So ultimately, as a hiring manager, I think numbers don't lie. Data never lies, and a statement without data is just an opinion. So ultimately, I have some pretty, important D&I metrics in terms of hiring that I strive to achieve when building my engineering team. And I'm very proud to say that, since joining Soul Machines, I expanded my team 300% during the pandemic. So that was crazy. Many Zoom calls, many late nights, but I actually grew, our engineering team to be 60% women, 60% women of color, very diverse in terms of gender identity as well. I'm also, a queer engineer. My partner's trans, so that is ultimately very, very important to me. But I know I'm not, this is just my experience. I know that it's not like this across the board, but I do feel like I can make a difference and I can make an impact, and I did. So that's ultimately because I feel like it's really important, to have diverse engineers, pushing different code to production. I think it makes for a better product and a better team as well. For answering this question in terms of being an employee at a tech company, I would give some advice. I would give some career advice would look like this, have resolve, be hungry, grow your toolkit, Find your champion. Find your champion. This is really important. Your boss doesn't necessarily only have to be your champion. It's really often good to go, seek a champion, seek a mentor outside of your department, get that critical feedback to just grow and evolve. And, if there is a kerfuffle, always bring it back to the work. The work doesn't lie. You can say, here is what I've done. Here are the outcomes I've produced. Let's talk about the work. Bring it back to the work. Bring it back to the work. That's really important. And also just don't listen to the haters. People, you'll walk into a room and some people will say you can't do it. Well, don't listen to them, and just keep going. So that's kind of how I would answer that question.
You're on mute.
Thank you. No, I can do it too. I've been on mute. Saying from my researching, what I found the difference between AI, machine learning, deep learning is AI aims to build machines which are capable of thinking like humans. ML aims to build machine learning through data so they can solve problems. And DL aims to build neural networks that automatically discover patterns for future detections. So I just want the speakers to keep in mind, like answering when I'm asking their specific industry question, what do you mean when you say AI? And I'll give the first talking stick to Marjorie. Her question, in addition to that, is how is the industry unfamiliar with AI responding to essays or, a new companies in a new field like products?
Good question. So we're machine learning and specifically NLP. So we use obviously the big language models out there, but then we fine tune it with our own language models. And we have our own team of data labelers in multiple languages. So machine learning is kind of where we're at. And I determined a number of years ago that perhaps NLP was out of the lab and could be applied to this problem. And the problem we have solved is the manual data transfer that comes along with reading regulatory documents. So permit, regulation, and every corporation has to have permits and regulations and standards they have to follow. And at the moment, a human has to read those tens of thousands of pages with a pretty high error rate and inconsistent interpretation, which I think erodes environmental compliance and sustainability overall. And it's a multi-billion-dollar cost to the bottom line. So NLP, we use machine learning because we're teaching the machine to recognize what requirement is. What do I have to do out of hundreds of pages? And based on myself and my co-founder's experience working in environmental health and safety for 20, 30 years, we're able to teach the algorithms to do just that with a curated output that any corporation that has a permit or people or a footprint anywhere, any type, any size would need our service. So it's kind of revolutionary. And we came out in 2018 with a prototype, and in 2019 first kind of showed it to our industry at conferences. Remember that, when we actually had conferences. And I called the company EHS AI because, which I get slammed for a lot in the AI community, but it was what I needed to do to get people walking up and down the aisles, get their attention about what we were doing. So 2 years ago, there was lots of questions about, well, what is it? What are you doing? Where are you getting the data? How accurate is it? How do you train it? Like, what are you actually doing? It seems like magic. I don't know. Is there people behind the scenes doing it manually overseas or something like that? So overcoming first just that it wasn't magic, that it was well-trained models, the output was accurate based on decades and decades of experience doing this thing over and over again. And slowly over the last 2 years, people have become very familiar with it, very comfortable with it. And in our field in environmental health and safety, there's a lot of data analytics tools that kind of mine incident data, for example. So that's brought a lot of value, looking back years at your incident data, trying to save lives. So AI is kind of creeping in everywhere where a corporation might want to mine their data lakes. And so it's been easier and people are more familiar with it. And they really see that the accuracy we produce is superior to a human in that kind of volume. So it was kind of a hard go at the beginning, but with the name and persistence and a proof with the product, we were able to overcome some of those barriers.
Thank you, Marjorie. That's very informative. I know it's like when you're explaining, oh, you don't have to do like reading through like huge pile of documents, and that would have been helpful like when I was like an English literature student and reading all the different books. It's like, okay, I just had to find this one citation. Yeah, thank you. I'm going to, let's see, so many tabs open. Hand the talking stick to CRISTINA. So in addition to keeping in mind, like, what do you mean by when you say AI? My question, try to tailor to your field. If it's like, there's a better question to ask or answer, like, totally feel free to like contribute that.
Great question.
Yeah.
So-
I just want to say the specific industry question I had for you is how do you approach innovating in two very like disparate areas, like human computer interaction or AI or machine learning. But if there's like another point you want to discuss on, that's totally okay.
Can I answer the previous
Yes.
point you were making? What is AI and
And then the
okay.
industry specific question. Yes. I know it's
Okay.
been a long day.
It's okay. So this question of what is AI, it's a great question. It's a daunting one. I don't think anybody has a clear answer. What I always tell my students when I teach my introduction to AI course is that there have been 4 general schools of thought in terms of how to approach AI. One is the one that you mentioned, right? Building systems that can think like humans. But then there is also building systems that can think rationally, okay? Which is humans don't always do, right? And then there is the same definition on the acting dimension, because just thinking, doesn't take you far when it comes to acting in the world, right? So there is also acting like humans and acting rationally. So these are 4 different areas of research in AI. And specifically the one thinking like humans is more related to cognitive science and cognitive psychology, where you really try to create intelligent agents that use mechanisms that mimic the mechanisms that human cognition relies on, right? But you don't need to have that to have intelligent behavior or rational behavior, because you can also have, say, machine learning driven systems that are not really based on any cognitive science principles and still have behaviors that can be defined as intelligent, right? So these are sort of like, and I really appreciate all these views are all very respectable, and different people see AI from that perspective, and there's no right or wrong, right? It's just how you want to approach it from a research and innovation point of view. And I would say deep learning is a type of machine learning. So it's everything related to learning from data as opposed to reasoning and acting based on knowledge and first principles, right? Which is the other approach, which is consider the old-fashioned AI approach. But one thing that I want to mention that I think is very, very, very important is that in the last few years, there has been incredible enthusiasm and for data-driven approaches, machine learning approaches for the right, for good reasons, because when you have enough data, there are certain tasks that these techniques can really do really well, right? Predictive tasks, pattern recognition tasks. But even the most passionate advocates of machine learning are now recognizing that by itself, intelligent behavior that is just based on data cannot go that far, right? So the right approach is really in the middle, where you use data, and that's what we do, right? I mean, learning is part of the intelligence. As humans, we learn, and that's, it's, one reason why we are considered intelligent beings, but it's not the only thing that we do, right? It's not the only aspect of human intelligence. So bringing the data-driven approaches and, I'm going to call them knowledge-based approaches together, it's really something that's now becoming, again, the focus of a lot of the more advanced AI research. acknowledging that, again, data driven is going to be is there, and it can have amazing results. But especially when it comes to this idea of human-centered AI, right? This concept of explainability is becoming also very important, to have these machines that can actually act in an environment where they can justify their behavior, so that humans who need to interact with these machines can really understand what's going on, understand when this machine should be trusted, but also understand when no, they should not, right? The only way, if these machines can somehow explain what's happening. And it's really hard when you have a ginormous deep learning model that has, thousands of parameters that not even the model designers know what they mean, right? So it is a big, it is a big issue. There's interpretability and explainability of AI models is really becoming, again, one of the hottest research topics, because without that, it's going to be very difficult to do to create AI systems that can really become part of our daily lives. And that brings back the idea of innovation, right? In terms of applications that can really be, products. We do need to have that sort of level of transparency that will enable these artifacts to be accepted, used, but also accepted at a level that will make it, this human AI interaction really like a winning card.
Exactly. Like I think people are more used to using, say, Siri or Cortana or Alexa because we had Rosie from the Jetsons in the cartoon shows.
Sorry, I missed the last sentence because we had
what? We had the Rosie robot maid in the Jetson cartoon show. So we're like, okay, yeah, robots can help us in our day-to-day tasks. That's why we accept maybe Alexa or Cortana
right.
now.
But
I don't know.
Remember, right, that even Siri, I mean, now my daughters are grown up, but for the longest time, breaking Siri was their, was something that they really loved to do. But then in the end, they got bored because it was really easy to break Siri.
This is a good segue.
They're still not approaching, at all human level natural language communication, right? So they're doing amazing things. I don't want to dismiss what is happening now, right? But it's also important not to create unrealistic hype, as sometimes the news are doing. Right? We've seen a lot of that.
I agree with that, Christina. It's a lot of information. Now you could just, like you said, you're a teacher, you could go on for maybe 2-hour lecture on the material. But I really appreciate you're able to condense it down for us. But this is also a good segue. Hand the talking stick to Holly. So her question is, what is the role of design thinking in AI in relation to her work at Soul Machines?
Yeah, I think so. Christina, what you just said was just like an explosion of goodness. And I just want to echo exactly what you said, because it's directly relational or related rather to this answer. So when you talk about kind of design first principles, well, we have to, or AI is a design language. We have to really kind of define some concepts here. So kind of a design language is probably some kind of standard way to, communicate a set of concepts so people don't have to relearn things over and over again. And designing a comprehensive design language for AI would probably entail, defining a set of tools or techniques that could standardize and improve how we interface with, ML technology, in a way that is human-centric, right? That's important. And I actually don't think that many, ML companies have like a core set of first principles around the ML systems they designed, which I think is really important. And it's important because ultimately, all AI systems are decision-making systems, right? So we need to define kind of, a core set of first principles around the outcomes of these decision-making systems, because in production, that could, snowball into, really crazy scenarios, especially, if ML models are biased and making decisions on, the livelihood or future of people. I mean, we know predictive policing is really, really dangerous. There's been a lot of hype around, bias and racism and facial recognition technology. I mean, this is fundamental. This is really important. So I think to answer your question, I mean, I think it's really coming back to, you know, what would be the core principles or first principles around designing decision-making systems. And I don't think that's talked about, frankly, enough. But to give you, you know, a few that, you know, have already been mentioned, you know, interpretability, explainability, transparency, fundamental, you know, like how easily should one, you know, understand the decision and its reasoning, you know, we need, you know, accountability there. Probably, you know, one core principle would be coverage, you know, which data is needed and how comprehensive should it be in order to make decisions in production environments. Another one would probably be, you know, salience. So how surprising or bold or unexpected should these decisions be? You know, and then malleability, which CRISTINA kind of mentioned, you know, decisions, how can decisions evolve over time and based on what? So, you know, these concepts are really important. And I actually don't really think that many people are, you know, developing a core set of design first principles when deploying ML systems. But I think because technology is built by humans for humans, it probably should be more well considered. And so that's kind of a call to action there. But you know, at Soul Machines, we are a human machine cooperation company, right? We build digital humans, you know, to humanize computing surfaces, to humanize computing, and we're ultimately our technology is human centric, but also humanoid. We're developing humanoid machine interfaces, so there's a little bit of like a meta thing going on there, but we are ultimately human centric. So we are tackling these questions. We're developing, you know, design first principles, and the ethics involved really in deploying production level ML systems with our clients. So.
Thank you, Holly. I also want to add presenters. There's the Q&A tab. You can see if there's a question you see relevant, you have knowledge relevant to answering, feel free to answer in the chat. And I'm just going to hand the talking stick to Bethany. So I know, Bethany, we had like 2 questions. So I guess the first question was like, what is your process in developing AI strategies that match national or local strengths and needs? And the other one was, what regulations do you have to be aware of when developing AI?
Sure. So my background, when you're saying like, what is AI to you? So my background is actually machine learning with robotics. But more recently, I've been doing a lot more business centric AI, which is usually machine learning and data science. So a lot less, you know, in the real world, it's more data driven. And I usually try to separate them out to decision making and autonomy, because those are actually 2 different things that kind of need to be addressed. So I've been delivering workshops to organizations going into artificial intelligence for the National Research Council quite recently. And we really focus on like, are you talking about decision making? Are you talking about data? Are you talking about automation? Like, what exactly are you talking about? So it's a 2-day workshop where we parse out, and I actually tell them never to use artificial intelligence like in their internal team. It's fine to get money, but internally, like, it doesn't have enough of a definition to really guide how your company is going to move forward. And so it's really clear to identify what you're trying to do. And then like, what do you need to do that? Do you have enough data? Do you have enough people? Do you have enough oversight to do those things? And then honestly, a lot of it's communication to the team, communication to your customers about how you do that. Interestingly, because I've been studying a lot about bias and exactly all the stuff that Holly was talking about, right? The implementation and the adoption of AI has gotten so fast that it goes well beyond people that maybe thought about the affected communities, because it is just off the shelf, right? You can do a lot of artificial intelligence off the shelf these days with maybe not thinking about the implications of improper models and improper data sets. So I've been doing a bunch on that. And so in that research, you'll find that actually not many governments are thinking about this, or they're thinking about it, but they haven't actually set anything up. So right now, if you go and the strategy is like, how are you going to lose people if you do this wrong? I think, especially in the ethics space, right? There's a lot of backlash. If you are, and actually there was just a case in Italy that the company was fined for their algorithm being biased. And it wasn't intentional, it was like an Uber. But because of the way that the system was being, it was being biased against a certain kind of customer driving, and it was giving them poor ratings based on their behavior. Which is interesting and a little off-putting that it was not intentional, but it was a side effect of what they had done. And so, so governments are coming along. And so in Canada, I know BC government's working on it. The Human Rights Tribunal just made a recommendation saying that your data has to be collected in a certain way. You should be collecting ethnicity data, because then you can make sure that it's not being biased on it. And there's recommendations to the BC, to the federal government saying that the privacy laws should be expanded to include automated decision-making and proper data ethics. So it's coming. So you do have to be aware. You can't just like slap AI on and just deploy it because it can be extremely dangerous. So it's a little bit different than some of the software that's being used right now.
Right, because this new field, it's like, okay, what rules or regulations like do we should be aware of that for scenarios we might not know happen yet? You put on the risk manager hat, but thank you, Bethany, for sharing. So I'm trying to be aware of time. I know Christine and Holly have to hop up at 7 in 3 minutes. So just answer a few questions from the chat. So question from Nazrin. Are there any supportive funds for female entrepreneurs in the AI field? Maybe Marjorie can answer that.
Sorry, what was the question?
Are there any supportive funds for female entrepreneurs in the AI field?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
We just went to NSERC, IRAP, leveraged every single dollar, hundreds of thousands, that helped us last year enormously, and any other wage subsidy grants and any other related tech grants. We work with Emily Carr, UBC. I think Simon Fraser got a bunch of interns, but I don't know of any specific women in AI grants that came across my plate.
I think it's another question that you may be able to answer, Marjorie. It's also from Nazrin. What topic or points a female leader or manager in the AI industry should take care of as her priorities?
What I should take care of is my priority.
Or it's like you're a manager, it's like, okay, like I know on one end it's like, oh, to know like when you're hiring, you're interviewing the team, but are there anything else like in AI, like you said, like the biases, the blind spots?
Mm-hmm.
If not, that's fine. Yeah.
I'm not sure I'm understanding the question specifically, but I think if I recast the question as kind of what would I do to make sure that we had equal opportunities within the team and hiring opportunities within the team, then I think it just was keeping your eye on the ball. And as we grow from 25 to 50, just trying to make sure I can stay in the loop and try to do as much hiring myself as I can. But most of the time I cannot be in every single interview. So we have kind of like, here's the criteria of what we want to follow. And here's who we are looking for. And please, if we can hire a woman, please God do it. But I can't obviously be so overt about that all the time, but I do try to make sure my CTO understands that more women on the team makes a better product.
Okay. Happy to hear that. Thank you, Marjorie. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I'm going to pitch, I know, I think it's on Sensenni's plate, the next Women Who Code event. I think we'll do a film screening for AI stuff, so you may be able to ask more questions there. But yeah, thank you everyone for joining us tonight.
Thank you,
happy end of January and happy early weekend. And thank you, the speakers, to everyone for joining us.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Eliza, for stick handling this. It was awesome.
Thank you. This was wonderful.
Bye.